Hello and welcome to Making Media Now, the Filmmakers Collaborative podcast. I'm your host, Michael Azevedo. I'm joined on this episode by Laura Varela and Andrew Gonzalez, the producer and producer-director of American Sons, a new documentary that follows a brotherhood of Marines a decade after their deployment to Afghanistan, as they struggle to overcome the trauma of combat and the loss of many of their comrades. The film will premiere on PBS on January 12th and will stream simultaneously with broadcast and be available on all station-branded PBS platforms. The story of these Marines' time in Afghanistan is told through the video diary of Corporal J.V. Villarella, who was killed in action by an IED. J.V. had kept the video diary for his family back home in Texas, and his family generously shared it with the filmmakers. This personal, powerful footage provides a haunting window into what these young Marines experienced together. Now, a decade after J.V.'s death, his brotherhood of Marines continues to get together, helping each other cope with lingering trauma and strengthening the unbreakable bonds formed in war. A poignant exploration of grief and resilience, American Sons honors the service of these young men and spotlights the need for mental health support for veterans. Here's the trailer.
Yesterday, one of my boys stepped on an IED. He became a triple amputee, lost his legs and his left hand.
Everybody's potential enemy, you know? You can't trust nothing. Any step you take could be your last step.
You step off this path, most likely you might step on a landmine. Magnetic strip.
That's all magnetic strip.
And I'm like, dude, back up. Because if I set this off, if there's something there, I don't want both of us to die.
When he left, I told him, you better make sure you get a lot of pictures.
Hey, who has a bigger head, me or that?
Okay, why are you zooming in?
Whatever, boy.
It was crazy to know that you could be that close to someone at that early in stage, and it's someone from a different background.
Say west side, go like this. Cross, fingers. West side.
We all looked out for each other. We had like a actual love for each other. It's not just some dude, you know, you go out to field ops and then go to war with kind of deal. Like, you know, it's your brothers.
Fucking love you, man.
I love you too, man.
When you come back from that deployment and everybody parts ways within 30 days is not a healing process.
Every boom shot come to me, it take me back, man. I don't know how to get away from it.
Then I get that knock on the door. And you just go numb.
And I see Rios climbing out of the crater of the IED attack.
I miss everybody.
Yeah, me too, man.
All of them are my sons now, which they all call me Mom. I know they're a part of JB. Oh, they always will be.
We counted on each other from some of the most hellish places on earth and made it out of there alive. What we need now is an opportunity to heal together.
Making Media Now is sponsored by Filmmakers Collaborative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting media makers from across the creative spectrum. From providing fiscal sponsorship to presenting an array of informative and educational programs, Filmmakers Collaborative supports creatives at every step in their journey. To learn more, visit filmmakerscollab.org. And if you are enjoying this podcast, please do give it a like, share, follow. Now on to my conversation with Andrew Gonzalez and Laura Varela. Andrew Gonzalez and Laura Varela, welcome to Making Media Now.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Michael.
Pleasure to be speaking with you both today. And we're talking about your film American Sons, which will be airing nationally on PBS on January the 12th. And beginning January the 12th, the film will also be available on PBS Digital and a whole slew of other digital apps, which we'll make sure to include in the program notes for this episode so folks can find them. And one of the things I like that PBS does, well, I like a lot of things that PBS does, but in particular, one of the things that I like is they leave those films up there for a good long time, because often it's tough for people to catch them, even to record them on the night of broadcast. So American Sons tells the story of a brotherhood of Marines. I would say they're haunted by their deadly deployment in Afghanistan. And in this Brotherhood of Marines is specifically, you're talking about India Unit 312. So in the parlance of the Marines, Andrew, can you tell us what a unit is and what would distinguish, say, India 312 from another Marine unit?
Perhaps the listeners can correct me if I'm wrong here, but these guys were actually a battery. So they're the India Battery, which is smaller than a unit. It's probably roughly 100 guys that went out together, and they're part of the Marines 111 out of Camp Pendleton. So there was a battery that was put together to go into Afghanistan for this specific mission. And if I'm not correct, the last time they were assembled was in World War II.
Okay.
So yeah, and then after this mission, they were disbanded. So it's a much smaller group of guys that were put together to achieve a certain mission. And that was their battery, mostly artillery.
Okay, yeah.
What they were doing.
That's what I was going to ask. And this is really for either one of you. When did the particular story of this battery, of this unit, when did each of you become aware of this, and when did you begin to feel like this is a story worth telling in documentary form?
Well, we always say that JV was the original filmmaker.
JV, and let's share with folks who JV is.
So JV Villarreal, Corporal JV Villarreal, was a young Marine from San Antonio, from the west side of San Antonio, which is where I live, and Andrew is from as well. Mm-hmm. His sister is the one who received his footage after he was killed in action at the end of that deployment. And so that's why we always give him that credit. He did have the foresight to film his deployment. She wanted to do something with it because she knew that she had access to some pretty incredible photos of their deployment and the days before his death, the day of his death, and the day after, by Scott Olson, who's a Getty photographer.
Yep.
And that's when she connected with me. She brought me the footage and asked if it's something that I could help her with, tell the story. And of course, I was pretty honored and humbled and said yes. But I held on to it for several years because, it is quite an undertaking to do a documentary, right? Develop a documentary.
Yeah.
And many years later, when I had already been working with Andrew, is when the project kind of came about, when we had been discussing the next project.
Andrew, what was your take once you had access to that, the video that JV had shared?
So once we were exposed to the video, it was completely compelled, and I knew the story needed to be seen, mostly because JV was this charismatic figure that represented us being from San Antonio, and it was just something that I had never seen before. And the way he was showcasing his experience that he was having in combat was just something that was very rare. And the first thing that drew me in were some photographs that were shot by a Marine photographer named Scott Olson, who works for Getty Images. And at the time, he was with India Battery in Afghanistan. And he shot photos of their experience, but managed to capture the moments before, during, and after JV's death. So it was really a documentation of, the last moments of Corporal JV Villarreal. But at the same time, there was this other content of JV's first-person experience. So it's just kind of like the coalescence of those two things.
Yeah,
just made it to be something extremely special about this individual. And we just decided that this was something that we wanted to follow. One, we had that close connection, being from San Antonio, being able to represent this young Latino in Afghanistan. And then we just began to follow the story. And that's where all the other elements and themes that you see in the film really came into play.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling to think about, the American presence in Afghanistan spanned 20 years. And I would venture to say that, anywhere from like year 10 on, if you were to stop 100 Americans on the street and ask, what are we doing in Afghanistan and what's the objective and what's the casualty rate and so forth, very few of them would be able to tell you, really not through any fault of their own, but very shortly after the U.S. presence in Afghanistan, the attention all turned to Iraq. What did you come to learn about? And again, this is for either of you. What did you come to learn about the motivating factors that propelled not just JV, but the other Marines that feature in your film, the motivating factors that compelled them to join the Marines and to defend their country?
That's really kind of quite interesting because for many of the men, they had family members who were in the armed forces, not necessarily Marines, but they were maybe Army, Navy, Air Force, things like that. And different men had different reasons for joining the Marines. What's really interesting is that JV didn't have family members they were neither in the Marines nor did they serve in the armed forces. Just from a very young age, that we hear from his mother and his sister that he just always wanted to be a Marine. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's just being a part of the culture of San Antonio, where we have even though we don't have a strong Marine presence, we have a strong military presence. It's something you hear about. We have multiple military bases. And it's just something that's part of the culture. Or is it just watching, movies where that sort of culture is promoted, or video games, or just, American pride? We're not really sure what JV was motivated by. But since he was a very young age, his mother tells us that he just always knew that he was going to be a Marine. And then that's what he did.
I'd just like to say, too, that most of the men talk about 9/11 when they talk about joining the Marines, even JV, right? So like for many of them, that was a motivating factor. I think for many Latinos, once again, we've been in all of the armed forces in the United States, all the conflicts, and have a very high presence in proportion to our population within the states. So I think that's also like a motivating factor for quite a bit of the men and the Latinos that join the Marines and military.
Yeah, and your film, I think very strategically and very thoughtfully actually begins right off with some numbers that focus the mind on the toll that the 20-year engagement in Afghanistan took. 2,459 U.S. military deaths, 168,307 Afghan deaths, and 159,586 U.S. veteran suicides since 2001. So the pairing of all of those numbers, there was a reason behind that. Andrew, can you walk me through the thinking?
The reason that ended up becoming the introduction to the film is that there was variations of the edit. Mm-hmm. And so at first we were trying to incorporate more of kind of facts in the story, and it began to detract from the story itself, which was this personal human story of this family and JV and these men who've all come together to form this new family to cope with the challenges that happens after returning from combat. And so it began to just not fit to add something like the Afghanistan pullout or different things that were just more like fact-based documentary storytelling. But we needed to give presence to not only the U.S. armed force members who died, but also the Afghans who died, mm-hmm. which is not always considered. So we want to make sure that we are acknowledging those deaths. Well, the elephant in the room is the amount of suicides that happened. So that was also another thing. And so at that beginning was just kind of a clever way to amp up, show the amplification of the amount of deaths that happened post combat. Yeah. Now, another thing that it's doing there is the numbers are not easy to find, Michael. So if you try to seek out the numbers for suicide deaths, you'll find that they are buried in a variety of places. The VA does put out an annual report, but even that report is a little challenging to understand how many deaths as a sum, like 20 years of suicides. Like it's very difficult to find that out. So we used a number of different resources. Some organizations that's their sole mission, like for instance, Stop Soldier Suicide. They have a number that they were broadcasting for a while, and that was the original number that we were using. Well, that number's gone up. So if you go to their website, you can see there's been an increase in their number. We have another organizations that we work with, Irreverent Warrior, the Grunstyle Foundation, and they're very much on top of this. So there's a variety of different places that we retrieve the numbers from. There was a very famous study at a Brown University. That's kind of like what everyone always references. But those numbers, they're not as accurate as we would like them to be because they're really difficult to find. So a lot of it is just doing an average of the amount of suicides that happen every year. Now, certain things aren't, being even considered a suicide. So we're just taking numbers from the VA, numbers from other organizations that we worked with, and just trying to compile more of, hey, this is a big problem. And we want to, even though the film is not about suicide epidemic, it's about, what's happening behind the scenes that could lead to that. So we wanted to come right out the gate and make sure that we address the elephant in the room and let everybody know that, hey, this is a bigger issue. And hopefully by watching this story about one particular group of people, you can have a better understanding of what could be leading to these outcomes.
Just to go back to JV's footage for a minute, and this is footage that he himself shot. I assuming he's shooting it on an iPhone or the like during his. Is that not correct, Laura?
It was a GoPro and a video
GoPro.
camera.
Okay.
This was before smartphones.
That's right. I was just thinking of the years in my head as I said that. I was like, wait a minute, they didn't exist. Your film's just about an hour long, and I would say, all told, there's maybe about 20 minutes of JV's footage. How representative of the whole was the footage that you chose to include? And one of the things I really liked and I thought was so powerful about the footage that you did include was it felt very, very personal. There was the capturing of the sort of the building of relationships with his fellow Marines, but there was also, it was very day to day, and he was almost very matter of fact of, this is where I sleep. This is how we keep our water cold. And oh, look over there. That's where Taliban are looking to essentially, attack us from. What type of overall footage were you having to select from and say, this is the footage that's not only going to tell his story, but also has that propulsive element to keep the film moving?
In terms of JV's footage, we have what we had. And we use pretty much all of what he had.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Especially that first person stuff. There was some other stuff, but it was the movie is really about JV. And the reason is, and it goes back to those numbers, right? When you throw out a number like 2,500 people died, well, who are these people? And it's harder for the public who's not in combat to understand that, to make that connection. So this intimate, personal documentation that he was creating, it's so critical to making that connection. We see someone that not only is he charismatic, it's not only is he telling us more about his life, we're learning so much about him, but over time, you begin to relate to him. You begin to realize, I know somebody like this. Hey, this is a guy I grew up with, or this is me. And there's that human connection that's being made, and that goes beyond the numbers. And so that was really critical to making sure that we were connecting with audiences, so that when death tolls are announced, or when we are pushing towards helping veterans mitigate suicide, helping them with VA care or anything that we need as Americans to take care of those returning from combat or just military service, serving in general, that there's that personal relationship that's being made. And so in terms of the footage that we chose to use, it was kind of all centralized around what JV was providing us, right? He left behind this documentation of who he was. And it was up to us to tie that into a larger story, which is the people that surrounded him, that loved him, and that also experienced this tragedy.
And while JV's story is sort of the focal point of your film, he's not the only Marine that we get to know. In particular, there's a Corporal Angel Rios and Ty Klingman. I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Each of them have their own struggles after their deployment to Afghanistan. I would say that it feels like Ty's is more profound, but maybe one of you could speak to me about why you saw and how you saw it important to include Angel and Ty's stories, and how they came to illustrate the greater point of your film.
Ty and Angel are JV's best friends. And as you can see, he's a very charismatic guy. He had a lot of friends. He used to bring people together, and that's what everybody said about him.
Yeah.
However, Angel Rios and Ty were the people that were closest to him. And, at least we feel, and I feel that the Gold Star family, JV's family, feels that they were the ones that were one of the people that were affected quite a bit from his loss and the grief. I mean, aside from the unit, but it really affected them. And then plus, they both suffered some injuries, some very serious injuries in combat. Angel in particular also got blown up by an IED. However, he survived. So him and JV kind of went through the same thing. And then Ty is the one who, unfortunately, is struggling right now. And hopefully, we hear he's doing better, but he's the one who was having to deal with isolation and over medication. So,
Yeah, he has there's a sequence that is just so I would say illuminating and touching with him, where he talks about, looks like he's working in a kitchen environment, but he's just talking about how he feels purposeless. He wants to be a Marine. He wants to be back out there. He wants to be serving his country and supporting his fellow Marines, but his PTSD, and I believe he had a traumatic brain injury also, prevents him from doing that. And your heart just breaks for him in that.
In terms of these two characters, or these two participants being really what the movie, who tie the movie together, there's two kinds of films, two kinds of documentary films. One is a character-driven film, and one is a subject-driven film, or a topic-driven film. So it's not like we started the documentary and we were going, we need to make this film about veterans, and it's going to be about PTSD, and it's going to be about the issues they deal with. Like that, we knew that that's a thing, but that was really never in our focus. The focus was, we need to tell this story about JV. Like this is an American hero that we've never seen before. So it was very much a character-driven story. As we began to learn more about JV by setting up opportunities to meet with his Marine brothers, which was really like these gatherings that begin to happen at the very beginning of the film. JV's sister, April, would put together these gatherings so that we could meet, and we kind of just started filming preliminary during that. And the truth about it, Michael, is that two people really stood out in terms of engaging with the camera, and really personalities just kind of shine through, because we film with a lot of guys. Their personalities really just shine through early. They were the most generous with engagement. They wanted to talk about JV the most, and they wanted to be committed to telling that story.
Yep.
And so the camera naturally gravitated towards them. The things they said naturally rose up because they supported that story about JV. They supported that memory of him living on. Now, it just so happens that those two personalities, also certain things happened with them during the filming that added to the themes that veterans are dealing with, that turns American Sons more into an educational film.
Right.
That helps people understanding those real crises that are happening behind the scenes. It's just kind of one of those things. You begin to follow the story, and this is what comes up. And it's our job as a filmmaker to assemble it in a way that can be easily understood within 1 hour. Like, how do you sum up a 20-year war in an hour?
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Yep.
So it was really all about the human element. JV guided the way, and it's that love of him, and whoever that we filmed with was willing to engage on that level. That's what rose through, and that's really how they became those two participants that helped to guide the story. And it just so happens that they were this, I mean, JB had a lot of friends, as Lauda said, like they called themselves the friend group, but Rio Angel and JB, they were roommates. Ty, he lived down the hall in the very early days. And so you're talking about like basic training. You're talking about when you first show up to do your thing in the Marine Corps, you're becoming friends with these guys. And then 2 years later, you're going to combat with these same guys.
Right.
So that's like a whole experience. That gives you plenty of time to become very close. And it just so happens that three guys, we have photos with them, the three of them together. It's just a very special relationship that just showed itself, and we followed it.
As filmmakers, how do you go about finding your way into what I imagine can be kind of an insular, maybe closed group? First of all, they're Marines, and you all are not. They've experienced the both the bonding elements and the horrific elements of warfare, and you all have not. And here you are, outsiders coming in with your cameras, and I understand there's a family connection or a friend connection to the family. But still, I would imagine there's a process of establishing credibility and winning over trust, particularly since a lot of these men end up becoming very vulnerable on camera, which does not align with the stereotype of a Marine.
I mean, April Villarreal, we're very grateful to JV's sister, April Villarreal, who is the one who, she's the one who established the trust with the Marines, or helped start the communication and the relationship that we had with the Marines. Her and Yolanda, JV's mother, would have these reunions, and that's where we got to meet the men. And as you can see in the film, it's a new family now, and they're very tight, and they all love each other very much. Yolanda has this whole slew of new sons that I think have helped her through the loss of JV. But in terms of establishing trust, I think that's something that happened over time. And Andrew is the one who was able to spend quite a bit of time with them, because it was during COVID. And he was filming with some of the men. He had a crew a lot of times, but there was several times on some of those very intimate scenes where it was just Andrew. Mm-hmm. And he can tell you a little bit more from there.
Yeah, I would say that obviously, April, she made a very strong connection. It's that drive to keep JV's memory alive is another thing. And I also say that it's not always, the trust is there, but it's only because there's like a back and forth. Like there's a pushback at times, like sometimes there's a reaction to wanting to participate in a certain way or getting pushback. And really, it's my job just to stay present and to be there and be focused and be there with these guys to allow them to speak. A lot of times they want to share their story in a way that's not being told, right? So if they go, the only other people they're talking to might be their psychiatrist or therapist or whoever they visit in the VA, and maybe they're not getting to say the things that they want to say or express the way that they want to express. And so the situation that they're in like, I guess, a more professional space where you go to a doctor, you go to a hospital, and you have a limited amount of time, you're not getting to freely open up.
Yeah.
So the environment that we've created for them is one of just freedom, where we're curious, asking questions, wanting to know more over a long period of time. So it's just like, okay, let's do an hour interview, then we'll stop. Maybe tomorrow we'll film some more. So just like over the course of time, just building that trust. And like, I just want to say that it doesn't always go perfect, right? These are human beings that we're dealing with. They're people that have personal lives. They are being vulnerable. So sharing their vulnerabilities, they're really going out on a limb when they're doing that. So we want to, just respect that as much as we can. It is a challenge. We're making a documentary film that is going to be out there on a national level. So we are aware of what they may go through seeing themselves or having other people see themselves. And we just want to provide a space where we're doing that in a positive light as best as we can. We know that there are issues that people are suffering with, via TBIs, PTSD, suicide epidemic, lack of purpose, lack of mission, family issues, anything that's going on. We just hope that this film can communicate to the general public what these issues are in a way that they've never seen before. And that way, collectively, through how we vote or how we engage or just how we interact with veterans on a daily basis in our community, we can work to make these small changes and contribute in a meaningful way to this discussion the best that we can. And we're just grateful that these men were able to participate and allow that to happen. And I think in the end, this film is really going to do something very positive for the veteran community.
You know, does the fact that all three of these men, you know, JV unfortunately, you know, did not survive, but the survivors that are in your film, they are part of minorities, ethnic minorities. And does the fact that they are part of ethnic minorities and perhaps from a particular socioeconomic demographic, how has that impacted their readjustment and their ability to, you know, access the benefits that they are due, and also to, you know, sort of to reintegrate with society?
I think it really depends on their communities where they are. So in terms of like their ethnicities, you know, I can't really speak too much about that because not everybody handles their situation the same way. I think that if you're in a certain environment where maybe you're you know, things like government systems, they serve so many people, right? You're serving thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, millions of people at times. And so it's not always cut and dry. And it's not like you just go to one place and, you know, you get your response or things are just divvied out to you. There's a lot of systems all over the country in different environments, and some are better than others. So it really just depends on the demographics, I feel. I visited a lot of VAs during this whole process, and they're not all the same. Yeah. Some are big, beautiful, incredible things that veterans might enjoy going to. Some are small, some are understaffed, the type of staff that they have isn't the best. Getting access to resources, getting access to benefits. So you could visit one of your relationships that you have that help you with benefits. They might not treat you the same way as if you're in another part of the country. So it really just depends on geographical parts of the country. That's really all I can speak to, because in terms of just being able to get help, I think it just kind of depends on what level of persistence that you have as an individual. That's one of them. And then what part of the country are you being served from? Because even if you have benefits, it doesn't mean that when you go use them, they're going to, you know, give you the type of care that you need. And it's really like a case by case basis. I just want to always say that, you know, the VA is not something, you know, to blame. It's this giant system. Right. Just like any big system is really hard to manage and hard to maybe serve that many people. And there's, just like any other industry, there's people that are good and there's people that maybe not so good. There's systems that are good and there's systems that are not so good. So it's really a case by case basis. And I can't personally speak on it because I haven't gone through those systems to be able to try to get help. But I do see the challenges, and I can see, you know, some people that are doing very well, that have the access they need, and some that maybe aren't.
So in reading about each of you in preparation for this chat, in addition to your filmmaking experience, each of you seem to advocacy plays a big role in each of your professional and probably personal lives too. And I'm wondering if you'd just like to speak about that and how you see the advocacy that you're driven to participate in aligning with your mission, if I can call it a mission, as filmmakers.
Well, for me, a lot of my work has always served the Latino community. I feel it's important that we tell our stories to, you know, help fill in the gaps of the American story, the American fabric. And I think like our participation in America's military is very important, and we need the United States, you know, people in the whole country to realize that Latinos have been part of this society and have participated and paid their dues since the beginning, right? Since the American Revolutionary War. And so they're also, in World War II, we're Latinos have a very high amount of Medal of Honors. They've received Medal of, Medal of Honors in high amounts proportionate to their population in the military. So we still serve in very high amounts in proportion to our population in the United States. And so I feel that if we can tell these stories and help other veterans, not only Latino veterans and BIPOC veterans, but all veterans, right? We've done our job.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew?
Yeah, so I very much care about the human story. I very much care about unity, and we all have to live here together in this world. And it's important that we can understand and respect each other. And I think in order to do that, we have to know more about each other. Whenever I watch a film, be it a narrative that somebody wrote it, and so it's not even real people, and just say, for instance, someone gets killed off in the movie, and if you don't care about that person, what happens to them in the movie is just kind of just goes by.
Yeah.
You're just like, well, why? It doesn't matter. Who cares what happens to them, because you didn't tell me enough about them. So when in approaching anything, I really want to take the human element, and I want people to know more about that person, regardless of what participation they are in the world. Like, who are they? From the very small person that you wouldn't even, realize who they are, how they're helping your community. Like, let's say like the garbage man or something that, they're doing something very, very important.
Yep.
But most people won't even recognize that, oh, my garbage just gets taken away from me. I put it outside and it just goes, or you turn the water on and the water just comes out. Well, what about all those people that are part of that system? All right. And then you got to understand they're real people too. Like they're just like us. What are they experiencing? What's going on in their personal life? What are their struggles? And then you just begin to care so much about, an individual, because you see yourself. You're like, oh, you're just like me, and you have problems like mine, and you make those connections. And I think if we can make those human connections, we'll begin to care about those bigger issues.
Yeah.
And so it's like important, like for instance, in this story, it's just important to know about JV. It's important to know about Ty. It's important to know about Angel and the rest of these men and the families, to know more about them than just the number or what their last name was. You're not going to learn enough about them to care. And so it's our job for us to get to know them better and to reveal these deeper, intimate, vulnerabilities that allow the humanness to come out. So you're not just hiding behind language. It's very easy to say something to somebody and like a lot of these talking head documentaries, it's like just ask them questions and then just some responses. But when you see someone experiencing something, it's just so much deeper and richer. And that's what I want to do, is make those connections so that we can just care more, instead of just like, nowadays it's hard to care because the news cycle is just constant.
Absolutely.
And so we need to shine a light on an issue and then show more about that human so that we can remember them, and we can, and especially when we're talking about someone who died serving the country, they need to be remembered. You go to those walls and there's like thousands of names on the walls. It's like, man, it's hard to put yourself in that shoe. But when you see this young kid making jokes and connecting, you see young kids in Afghanistan and someone from the US interacting with someone from Afghanistan, and they're all kids, and you realize like, okay, there's kids over there too.
Yeah.
Like it's deeper than that. It's deeper than just the numbers, right? Like how many died
I think
on
it
this
was
side? How many died on that side?
I think it was Stalin, of all people, who said 1,000 deaths is a statistic, a single death is a tragedy. And the wonder of your film is that you reveal all these other stories through the prism of this one unfortunate, very premature death. When did you all wrap up production on this film?
2023.
And have you maintained contact with the members of India 312?
Yes, we're all pretty much in touch with all the men in our film.
Yep.
They come out to many of the screenings. They were there at the premieres. We premiered at South by Southwest, have screened at several film festivals. And we really want them to be part of our impact campaign. So we're going to be doing that this year.
Wonderful. Around the topic of PTSD being, it's sort of a comprehensive diagnosis, but it is experienced very individually, from person to person. And I'm curious if what either of you might have thoughts around, our in the past year, our Department of Defense is now the Department of War. A warrior ethos is really being dictated from the top down, wherein there's no room for anything perceived as weakness, and the definition of weakness has become super elastic and broad. And in hearing that, I wonder if either of you have any thoughts around the admission of having psychological problems might be more difficult for members of the military to make now, given that it may be perceived as even more of a quote unquote weakness than it previously was.
That's a good question. So the Department of, we've had the Department of War much longer than we've had the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense, relatively new thing, post World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So we were Department of War for a very long time prior to that. And of course, none of these things were addressed, I assume, during that time. There's been different names for it. In Vietnam, they called it shell shock. In terms of how we're moving forward, that's yet to be seen. We do know that there's a trend to be more considerate of these issues, that there's a trend towards that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's so much whether or not people are caring or the perception. I think that can the big machine that deals with these sorts of post-combat challenges, can they move in a way that works? Or is it the system just too big? Because what we have seen is a lot of success comes outside of that. A lot of success comes from organizations that are built from service members who have chosen post-combat life, post-service life to create some sort of a foundation or to create an organization that helps just for guys to get together, men and women to get together and share and open up. And we've seen a lot of success outside of the bureaucracy, outside of the government's role in this. And so that is a growing thing for
Mm-hmm.
sure. There's a lot of very vocal and very passionate people that are doing, and there's no shortage of organizations. Now, in terms of the government support, that's yet to be seen. I know that in our hometown of San Antonio, Texas, we had the second suicide out in front of the VA hospital. Last year in 2025, we had two very public suicides that
Mm-hmm.
took place from people who were just totally frustrated. And so, those might have been the only two that occurred, but there's so many more that haven't occurred that people have wanted to take their lives, and a lot of people who chose to do that at home or chose to do that in another way that may or may not be considered suicide, but the sentiment was one and the same. So I think, once again, there is a growing support for service members taking care of their own, choosing to do something about it. But in terms of government help, I think we've yet to really see any change there. And we're hoping that there can be some pressure from our politicians, starting at the local level, Texas, representing and lead the way in making these changes to, raise more of alarms and to have more of a focus. I'm not really sure what it's going to take to do that. Like I said, it's a big machine, that a lot of moving parts, but there's some very smart people that are in that world, and we just want to do our part to make sure that the message is there, to raise awareness so that those faces become prominent. When you think about these issues, you see the faces from our film versus just looking at a big spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers about, all someone's data and statistics about their, their heart health and their, this thing and that thing. It's just too many numbers. That doesn't help. Stories sell. Facts tell, stories sell. That's what they say. So we're here to show that story. We're here to show the human element and inspire some of our leaders to represent us and represent the service members in Capitol Hill and really make some meaningful change.
Your film succeeds significantly in that area of being a story of personal sacrifice, not just of these men, but also of their families and the people that will cherish their memory, but also have to live with the loss moving forward. And it's been a pleasure viewing it and speaking to you both about it. The film, again, is American Sons. It will air nationally on PBS on January the 12th, and also be available to stream on all of the PBS digital platforms thereafter. And I have been speaking with the producer and director, Andrew Gonzalez, and producer, Laura Valera. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
barely hanging on like a midnight cigarette. When the nights don't seem to end, and that lonely wind is singing you to sleep once again, I won't make a promise I can't keep. Like a river flows to the ocean deep, it goes on and on, bound to forever. Even when we're gone, it goes on and on. We'll be together at the rising of the dawn. It goes on. When your mind's on the loose, slowly wearing out like a faded old tattoo. When the days all look the same, when that lonely wind keeps singing, only you can ease the pain. That's the kind of bond that you can't break. Like looking up at all the stars in space, it goes on